Hi, welcome to the Diablo Podcast. This is your host, Flux, and we are online at diablopodcast.com. On this show, I am speaking with,
Azzure. Azzure.
and as you can tell by the double Z, he is not American. You are from Australia, right?
That's correct.
And you are going to be running a new, I guess it's sort of a hosted site, affiliated site, something like that?
Yeah, it's affiliated with you guys with IncGamers.com.
And you are covering the economy of Diablo 3.
That's right.
And obviously with an emphasis on trading and real money auction house and such, but not exclusively.
That's right. So we'll be covering a magnitude of things, basically everything that's got to do with the economy, the auction house, currencies, and things like that. We plan on covering because it's going to be such a big subject.
People have talked about mostly with this topic is the real money auction house. And we had a podcast previously, kind of debating the ethical ramifications of that.
Mm.
And I don't think you're that interested in that argument. You're just really in the economy and how things function, and you're just kind of dealing with how Blizzard is presenting this feature, and you're not really here to argue for pro or con, right?
Exactly. Just dealing with the hands we've been dealt, and we're pretty indifferent to the ethical principles about it and all that stuff. We're more into the practical side of how it's going to work and how it's going to affect everybody.
And do you have an opinion on that?
It was a shock when they did announce that. But with that said, I don't think it's going to be anywhere near as negative as people are sort of arguing. I think it's going to be something that would have occurred anyway outside of Blizzard, whether it's Blizzard supported or not.
You sound like Rob Pardo.
Well, look, it's something that again, the counter argument to that is, it's if they are supporting it, it's going to happen even more, and it's going to be, it's kind of like dealing with the devil. But look, I think it does present a unique opportunity. I think that in putting another currency into the game will, I think, enhance a lot of the trading in it. It'll make it more exciting. It'll, give people real world value.
Inflation is an issue.
The only time it becomes a problem is when it outpaces the growth of the actual economy in the game. And that's when the price of currency starts to devalue, and that's when we get all sorts of problems. And I think World of Warcraft's weathered that pretty well, especially with the amount. I mean, if there was no Chinese farming going on in that game, it probably would have still been a very, very good economy. Gold would have been, at the right price. It would have been quite well balanced. So I think they did a decent job. They had pretty good currency system in that it really had a lot of gold sinks, and it controlled the amount of inflation very well. In Diablo 3 though, it looks like it may be a little bit different. World of Warcraft is very different. The biggest difference between World of Warcraft and Diablo 3 is obviously you don't use currency to purchase equipable items. I mean, you can, but it's not part of the end game. It's not the way it works. You get
because all the good items are bound basically.
Exactly, and then they all come from end game rating and things like that. So I mean, what we saw happening was instead of outright buying items, what people would do is they'll pay gold to participate in another guild's run, and they would get an item that would drop. So they'll basically just sit in the back, in a 25-man raid, they'll just sit at the back and they'll pay the guild, 10,000, 20,000 gold, and they'll just sit there. And if the item they want drops, they get to get dibs on that item. So the economy was I guess people were trying to mimic what happens in Diablo 3, where you can actually use gold to get items. And in World of Warcraft, it's just not like that. The only and the best items you can get on the auction house are just a handful of bind on equip items that aren't very powerful at all.
In World of Warcraft, if you have your gold and you buy items, you buy materials from other players, then you use those materials to attempt to make your own items, which are then item bound if they turn out well.
Yeah, I mean, there are some recipes that do make some decent items, especially towards the later expansion packs. They've given people the ability to create items that are, I guess, powerful. But in general, I think 90% of the trading that goes on in there is to buy materials for things like making potions and things that are done for PvE purposes. So prepare yourself for a raid. You buy your elixirs, your potions.
So consumables. So things you're using them and then you're using them up as you play.
Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to items which kind of stay around forever.
That's right.
You can obviously trade for or buy with gold or even real money materials in Diablo 3 and use those for crafting.
We'll say there's a 1% chance that an item that takes one of this, certain crafting material, there's a 1% chance of you getting the optimal item, right? So in theory, if you do get that, then that should be 100 times the value of what it costs to make, and that would basically make an equal economy. But that's not going to happen for many reasons, because you can get an item that's nearly optimal, which will also be worth many times more than the crafting material. So the actual crafting system is going to be very, very, unstable to begin with. Again, I think that it is a gold sink, which means that when you do craft items in Diablo 3, you will be taking a loss. So it's not an investment opportunity at all. It's something that you use to, it's a gambling system fundamentally. It's 100% a gambling system. You're basically gambling currency, gold, materials for a chance to create something that is worth more than what you've invested in. And that's how it should be. If it's a zero-sum system where you get exactly what you put in, then the economy is going to go crazy. Everyone's going to have excellent items. It's going to be the amount of wealth that everyone will have will be too high, and it will make the amount of good items also too high.
There's a lot of other variables. The time you spend crafting, you could be spending running monsters
Exactly.
and trying to find items. And they've said findable items will potentially be better than craftable items. When you hit the real slot machine jackpot running a Diablo, you're not going to get that super, super high quality item crafting, but maybe there'll be a better chance to get a really good item crafting.
Exactly.
We don't know how it's going to work yet.
The way the items, relate to each other. Rare items, the best rare item is going to be slightly better than the best unique / legendary item, and that's actually, it needs to be like that, because the fact that you can't physically get the best rare item in the game, it's nearly impossible. I mean, to get perfect stats is in the billions of 1 in a billions of chance to get. So it's always going to be that the rarest item is always the better item. Crafting, from what I understand, is pretty much, you can craft rare items, so it's the same sort of principle. It's just that you're kind of forcing the slot machine, you're kind of forcing a rare a drop, but you're paying for it. So the difference is, you could be out in the real world, in the Diablo real world, and you could kill a few monsters and you get a rare item and you identify it. Whereas the crafting system is more like, okay, I'm paying this system to give me a random rare item. Instead of running around killing monsters until a rare drops, I'm telling this crafting system, I'm paying it to give me an item. Most crafts are going to be rubbish.
I'm thinking that if you find a rare item in the game, it can be like, say, from 1 to 10 in quality rating, and maybe the best crafting recipe will make an item that's from 5 to 9 quality, something like that. So I mean, it'll take expensive materials, but you're guaranteed to get something pretty good because you know a few of the preset mods.
Yep.
But you can't ever get that perfect 10 item, but an 8 or a 9 is pretty damn good. It might take you 100 monster drops to get an 8 or a 9. You might get that 10% of the time with that recipe.
Yep.
But that recipe might require 5 or 6 units of some really expensive rare material.
That's where I think that it's going to be, the whole point of it is to be quite a big economic sink, including gold and materials. It has to be. There's nothing else that really eats up commodities like that in the game at the moment. In theory, you should be better off just running around in the world, selling all your commodities that you do come across, selling all your scraps on the auction house, because I think the person who crafts the item is going to be the person who won't. Like I said, it's going to be a negative investment. It's not going to be something that will potentially could turn you very rich if you get very lucky. The first craft you do, you probably get a 9 out of 10 item, and then you've obviously invested a tiny amount and gotten a very good item out of it. But as an average, it's going to be quite a big money sink. From what we've seen in the beta, gold is used in every craft. You have to pay a certain gold fee to, even though you've got all the materials, it still costs gold to run that.
Okay, before we get into inflation and deflation somewhat, Nineball is online, and he wanted to have a few questions for you as well.
Great.
I'm going to add him in here with any luck. And he is one of our regular podcast guests and is also interested in economy stuff and is a big World of Warcraft player. So perhaps he will have some clever insights.
Greetings.
Howdy.
Sorry about being late there.
Okay, so inflation and deflation. You said that World of Warcraft has done a pretty good job keeping prices, although they've kind of gone up for character stuff, for between character trading. Do you think that Diablo 3, you were just saying you don't know if the gold sinks in D3 are going to be adequate. It seems like it's mostly repairs and crafting that's going to cost money.
Yep.
It's hard to imagine from a Diablo 2 perspective where gold was that yellow stuff on the ground that got in your way. It's hard to imagine actually needing to pick up gold and having a value for gold. Are we thinking they're really going to be able to keep this a valid currency?
I would expect them to be able to do it because they were able to do it in World of Warcraft. I mean, you got to remember when World of Warcraft first came out, a lot of those players played Diablo 2, and they were very familiar with the fact that gold was quite useless. Um, so coming in there, they were able. I think they did like I said before, they did a pretty good job at controlling the economy and keeping it very valuable. I mean, till this day, people are still using gold, as primary currency. So, that in itself is proof of that. From If you'd asked me this question before beta, I would have said, I'm very, very convinced that they've got this in hand. Um, but to be honest, from what I've seen so far in the beta, I'm not too impressed with the amount of gold versus the spending on it. And now that could very well change because it's still, you got to remember this is only levels 1 to 10. So there's probably a lot, they want to ease people into the economy. They don't want to sort of just throw out all these options and all these things to spend money on straight away. They don't want to overwhelm the player. So this could be just, their way of giving new players, I guess, a lot of rewards. Giving them lots of money, and they've got, they can buy whatever they want at the beginning. But the gap may widen. But as it stands right now, I mean, from what I could see, 1 hour of play can yield someone about, I think, about 5,000 gold through one playthrough of the beta. Now 5,000 gold, that in itself, I mean, as a quantity of 5,000, it's going to, for such a, I guess, early game, if we're already reaching 5,000 gold, I think that's a bit of a problem because once we hit, level 60, we've got these awesome items that are, worth maybe 10, 20, $30. It's going to cost about 1 billion gold. If you convert what 5,000 is in the first hour of playing the game, then surely after the first month, we're going to get items that are going to be worth, in the billions of gold. Now, to me, the number alone is pretty. It's hard to read. It's bad design to have to be dealing with billions of gold so quickly. Whereas, in World of Warcraft, 1,000 gold in WoW Vanilla, 1,000 gold was huge. I mean,
Oh,
not many
that
people
was a
had 1,000
fortune
gold.
in vanilla.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that part
Do you,
is one
do you
concern.
think just having the bronze, copper, silver kind of nomenclature would help just in terms of making the figures seem more, manageable?
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways they could do. They could do a system like that, or they could just lower the prices and lower the amount of gold that's dropped. Um, they could make it so, not virtually every monster drops gold. It's more of a, I guess, the same quantity, the same rarity as, say, a magical item, where, every, 20, 30, 40 monsters might drop, 10 gold, or 5 gold or something like that. So they can just control the flow of gold, rather than, or they could just use a three-tiered currency, which they do in WoW. Either one would work. For readability, I'd probably go with the WoW system where there's three sort of sub currencies, just to keep numbers sort of relevant to whatever level you are. But that's one issue that so far we've seen in beta where the numbers are too high. The second issue is 5,000 gold is equal to about I think it's about 10 crafts. You can craft about 10 items with that, not including the materials, but just the gold sort of cost of crafting. And you can also, each set of stash slots is about 2,500 gold. So that's two sets of stash blocks in just 1 hour of play. To me, that feels a little bit too much gold. 10 items and two sort of stash unlocks is a bit too much for just 1 hour of from the beginning of the game. 1 hour of play. Now, like I said, that could be just their way of introducing new players to be able to just quickly spend money very quickly, and it's sort of gratifying. They might up the gap between that later in the game. Maybe the
Well, yeah,
income much lower.
they also, do something like that in World of Warcraft with bank tabs. Your first bank tab is only 150 gold, whereas when you get to the eighth bank tab, it's now 5,000, where the price substantially increases, per one that you go. Whereas as we're seeing in the beta, it's 2,500 per 14 slots until you fill up that page, and then you'll have another page that you can purchase. Although I don't know if that's implemented in the beta. I haven't seen any videos on that one. But I think they said it was something around 8 or 9 actual tabs that you can go throughout and purchase in your shared stash. So that first 14 slots that you're purchasing, is your first of about like 25 purchases in order to actually go through and finish out your stash.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something that they could do. The second set of so if you get your second I guess bag in your stash, maybe then the price maybe triples. It's 7,500 per 6 slots or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
So that may be their plan, and if that's the plan, I think it's a good plan, because it solves both problems where you always want the new player to be able to come into the game and feel like they're really rewarded by playing the game. So they've got all this money, they can spend it on more space, they can spend it on using the crafting system, and it sort of introduces them to the crafting system. But I hope that's the plan, because if it stays the same sort of rate, where the income's roughly the same as what it is now, and the spending is about the same, then I think it's too much. 1 hour of play shouldn't give you 10 randomly generated items, or two sort of set of stash slots, because that's going to inflate very quickly when later on the track, when people start to fill up their entire stashes. What are they going to do with all that excess money? I mean, there's only so much the artisan system can take in before it starts giving too many good items out to everybody, because we're getting such large volumes of crafts. So that part of it is a bit concerning at this time, but again, that could change.
And we don't know anything about the end game costs or prices. I mean, item repairs might really escalate. Item damage might pick up really quickly.
That's
and there
true.
may be some other gold sinks.
And-
I mean, we don't know. I mean, the crafting, we don't know if it's going to increase the prices arithmetically. It might be exponentially, like you're saying with the gold slots. And the crafting now is 100 gold or something, and you get to level 60, and the high level crafts might be 50,000 gold. So
yeah, and that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that's what they're doing. They're making things. They're going to widen the gap, so to speak, later on, just to I could totally understand why they're giving people so much gold to begin with. It's always nice to give new players, reward them for playing the game and using the crafting system and all that sort of stuff. So hopefully that's what they're doing.
yeah, you had a point, Nineball. Let me just say one thing before you jump on that. I think maybe they might be kind of handcuffed by the Diablo system, which is shiny, shiny, shiny all the time. I mean, you can't really have a gold drop every 10th monster or every 20th monster. I mean, you could for a valid economy, but Diablo players are programmed to expect, just a damn, waterfalls of gold everywhere. And even though they're fairly small quantities, it just might be like they don't feel like it would be a proper Diablo game if they don't drop shiny all the time. So they've got to find ways to make it, make the prices more, make it. And on the other hand, if all you're finding are 1 or 2 gold stacks, it kind of seems pointless to pick them up when you need 20,000 for your next craft. But obviously it'll add up over time. And they have those really cute little gold picking up helpers as well.
Who doesn't want to be followed around by a chicken?
Or a snake, or a weasel, or a money.
Centipede.
Centipede. Which is not a golden centipede. I was a little concerned by, but you had a point there, I think, Nineball.
Yeah, and I just pulled it up, and it looks like some of the adept weapons, which is, I believe, and just Mr. Titus, one of the beta testers on the forums. He uploaded a bunch of photos, from the blacksmith, and some of the adept, some of the higher level like crafting, already cost like 6,000 gold for like some of the rares, some of the but then again, I mean, that's a level 21 item. And it only costs like 6,000.
Yeah, and that's like Act 3, I mean, equivalent.
Yeah.
Not exactly end game.
Yeah, and because I mean, the way that I look at it is, 5,000 does seem like a lot, but it's only a lot if it's, relevant. It's like if everything is going to end up costing you, like if you get to Act 4 and all the enemies are dropping 100 gold, and so you can go through and clear through all of Act 4, and you end up with like 1 million, but everything to craft costs 3 million. It does. I get your point where it does become a little bit ridiculous because you're dealing with such large figures. The actual, how much is 5,000 in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah, and then you just lose the sense of it being manageable for the human mind. You look at then you're getting it's like Zimbabwe economy, and they're printing $50 billion notes because it's hyperinflation kind of.
Oh
thing.
yeah, or
Yeah,
you,
I mean,
you go.
it's just kind of no fun to think I need 1.5 million gold for this, and I'm picking up 5,000 per item. It's like this is ridiculous. It just seems the scale seems wrong.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I mean, if you look at readability, if you're in the auction house and you're trying to find an item, if you're using the gold auction house, you're going to see items for 1.56 billion, and you got to literally count the zeros to see, is that 1 billion? Is that 10 billion? Is that 1 million?
One big point we haven't really gotten into is item binding. And as you pointed out in World of Warcraft, it's not much of an item selling auction house because you can't really sell the good items or trade the good items because they're all bound. And in Diablo 3, nothing is bound. And they were saying for a while that maybe the very highest items would be bind on equip probably, but not even not bind on account. But now they're saying nothing. So have you factored this into your complicated economic tables yet and said what's going to happen because of this?
Yes and no. I mean, it really depends on drop rates. Now, the analogy that Blizzard always give about that, that 1% analogy that they've mentioned about when
Which
they
is
fight
wild,
binding
which is
system,
wildly inaccurate, of course.
it's
But
it's
Yeah.
very, very misleading what they're trying to say
it's
because
missing a
if
few zeros before the decimal there, or after the
it's
decimal. Yeah.
it's very silly because they're basically saying that if a binding system will only remove 1% of items from the economy, but that's the 1% that we care about, No one really cares about the other 99% that are quite useless. It's these 1% of the most powerful items that is going to drive the market so much. So that analogy is a bit, it's a stupid excuse not to put a binding system. I'm not for or against a binding system. I think a binding system works very well for certain things. And if there was a binding system, it would have to be a bind on equip system or a bind on account system, because a bind on acquire system or a bind on pickup system would just fail miserably. That would make items suck because you're a demon hunter and a two-hand sword drops. You can't sell that, which
Woohoo.
is just lame. Um, so I think in terms of inflation and the relationship, binding would actually heavily solve the problem of endgame item inflation because it would allow people to only use that item once and no one else can benefit from that item ever again. So that, in essence, the action of using an item removes it from the economy, which is, that will definitely stop inflation. It'll definitely slow inflation in the end game. Whether it's necessary or not is another question. I mean, it could be that items are so rare that who cares if, you can trade this item that you've just used to someone else because it's so rare, it's still going to be very, very, very uncommon to see someone with that item. Um, so I think we'll have to see how rare things are and how good the end of game crafting recipes are. I mean, the last thing you want to see is, every second person you see having just, the nearly best of slot item equipped in the first 3 months. It's something you don't want to see. It's
That
always good to be able to see someone with that awesome item because they just stands out so much.
It's actually one of the things with some of the stuff that Jay has said that has me a little bit concerned because when asked, what about the item drop rates? What are they going to be like? He constantly has said, not as bad as Diablo 2, as far as being able to get those items. And they constantly talk about the really good items and the ones that sell for a lot are going to be like the perfect rolls of the legendaries from all the random attributes or the actual set of attributes that it can be, whether it's 10 to 30 to all of your attributes or 10 to 20 life steal or whatever it's going to be, and that it's going to be those higher level numbers and those better rolls is what's going to actually differentiate the gear, but that the actual high end gear is going to be somewhat relatively easy to find.
Because Diablo 2, again, it was nearly a game where they stopped supporting because of what happened with Blizzard North. But their answer to the inflation for endgame items was to have ladder resets.
Hmm.
Whereas we know for a fact they're not going to do that in Diablo 3. To be honest, it's kind of like killing a fly with a bazooka, doing a system like that. And it's not very fun to have your hard-earned items just reset every 6 months, 6 to 12 months. So it is going to be something that I think they're either going to in, improve the items by adding new items that will make the past best items no longer the best items, and that sort of in itself kind of resets the item system in a way. A lot of the WoW gold farmers used bots. I mean, that was basically what 90%, 95% of farming was. It was just bots running, and basically you'd have one guy basically managing 50 bots each, and that's what basically a Chinese farming company would be. It would be just a few hundred people controlling thousands and thousands of bots. Um, the point to raise about that is Diablo 3 won't be as affected by bots as WoW because WoW's an MMO. It's very slow paced. You sort of pull one monster at a time. It's very slow and measured, and you can easily code a bot to just press, cast a spell every 3 seconds. In Diablo, it's not like that. In Diablo, if you're a bot, it's a hard life being a bot in Diablo 3 because you walk into a dungeon, you don't know how many monsters are going to come at you, you don't know what kind of monsters are going to come at you.
You don't know the layout, so the actual
Exactly.
AI has to be programmed. It can't be given just sets of coordinates of where to go
That's right.
specifically. It has to be able to map that out for itself as it loads into these new dungeons.
Yeah, and that's going to cause bots to die very frequently because the combat's also far quicker. I mean, if you looked at some of the videos that came out of the beta so far, you just see if you run into the middle of a pack of monsters, you'll die within 3 seconds, like full stop. You need to use your abilities very intelligently. You need to escape. You need to move around, and bots just simply can't do that. They're not coded well enough to be able to take on situations like that.
Also, one of the other problems with like a WoW bot as opposed to one in Diablo is just the situational awareness because a World of Warcraft it can it's the enemy will be self-targeted and it will know it's facing and it'll know where it has to go to in order to attack it. Although I know that they've done that in Diablo 2, but in Diablo 3 it's going to be completely different of actually being able to recognize where the enemy is on the screen where you're being attacked from. So it'll take them a while to encode things like that into the bots.
This all sounds like a hidden editorial about the skill required to play World of Warcraft, but we'll not get into that topic too much just yet. But yeah, it's so easy a computer can do it, or a caveman. So
Geico's on this one.
It's funny because people have often suggested in the forums and such that D3 will be exploitable by bots because everybody gets their own custom drop. I mean, it didn't do you much good to have 7 bots walking behind you in Diablo 2 because they didn't get any items. But in D3, if you could have a clever bots that would have 3 of them following your one really powerful character, then everybody gets the drops from every single boss. But as we've seen, the AI is smarter, monsters attack back row characters. You can't just park your bots at the edge of the screen and have them never get attacked. And they keep saying it'll be much more difficult with more players. So we're hoping that that's the game scales up enough that it makes that kind of botting not work.
Yeah, I mean, if the way it works is if there's 2 players, the monsters are about twice twice the HP and all that sort of stuff. So with the theory of that is if you've got 3 bots and 1 player, that 1 player is going to take about 4 times longer to kill the monsters. Therefore, it's no more efficient than having 4 different players trying to do it, if you know what I mean. So I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue unless you severely out-level the content where you get 4 sets of drops. But again, that's it takes you 4 times longer to kill the monsters than it would if you were just by yourself. So I think Blizzard did well with the design of that concept where if there's 4 players, it's 4 times harder, full stop, 4 times the length it takes you to clear it. So I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue.
But we're hoping that it'll be balanced. I mean, most people in Diablo 2 can play a 8-player game or play it by themselves on, player's 8 setting and just kill effortlessly. So we're just hoping that Diablo 3 will be a little better balanced, especially at the high end.
Well, from what we've seen so far, it looks like it will be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you can take your level 60 character and just charge through Nightmare and massacre everything very easily for a 4-player game. Mm-hmm. But then again, you're only finding Nightmare items, and those aren't going to trade for much. So
it's not as rewarding, yeah.
We're just still hope. We're assuming that you won't be able to just kick ass for 4 people all by yourself in Inferno, which would be where people would be able to exploit that system. And even if they can, it's going to be far less than the botting you see in Diablo 2 or World of Warcraft.
Definitely.
Or at least we hope so.
We hope so. The one actual thing that I had thought about is like the impact of multi-boxing. Since you can actually go through and say that you just get 4 of the same class, fit them out with the same skills, load up 4 copies of the game, and go through, have them all being controlled by the one master account. And, if you have it set to the same, keyboard and mouse inputs, you're all just walking around the same place using the same exact skills, attacking the same enemy. You're effectively, just doing everything in tandem. If there's the potential to go through and farm like that, is that what the Chinese farmers are going to start moving over towards? Are they going to be just multi-boxers where they'll have one person playing 4 accounts, getting 4 times the items?
It seems viable. I mean, I'm thinking like a wizard. You would want to change it a little bit. You wouldn't want all 4 of them casting the exact same spell. But if you could make it when I click this mouse, these 4 wizards all cast a different spell at the same time. You could kind of find equivalents. You give 2 lightning and 1 arcane and 1 fire or something in that slot.
Hmm.
And it seems like you'd have this quadruple-headed wizard, be like a piggyback of four wizards at once, all casting spells.
Yeah,
I mean, it
and
might not work as well with like a barbarian or something, but or a witch doctor would work pretty well, I would think.
yeah, have the four gargantuans, four sets of mongrels, just running around
Yeah, and
being
then
zoo
one's
people.
casting haunt, one's casting fire bat. They all have different attack spells, but they all have the same tanks.
Yeah,
Which brings up a good point because if you the witch doctor would be a very good botting character because the witch doctor's got pets that will do a lot of the work for you. It's not as bad as the necro, where the necro was pretty much the pets did all the work. With the witch doctor, it seems that they just sort of complement the witch doctor. He sort of you used to have to tell your pets to explode. You're basically directing your pets quite heavily, whereas the necromancer
And they're
just sits there.
short-lived, yeah.
Yeah, so
yeah. So
I think as far as botting goes, we'll probably see more witch doctor bots than anything else because they're more survivable, I guess, because they got pets that take the damage.
What do you think's going to happen when we get to expansions and patches, where mudflation is the common term used, where everything that's useful at this point becomes garbage the next week when the new patch comes out with a whole nother tier of higher level, higher quality stuff.
Look, it's something that every game, I guess, goes through. Happened in World of Warcraft very extensively. Um, Less about economy there because the worst that would happen is all your efforts would have accounted for nothing at the end when the expansion came out. But look, it's something that comes naturally with every game, and it's actually necessary for the economy because if that didn't happen, inflation would reach massive levels on higher end items. So we do need that constant refreshing of better items. So that will happen. Make no mistake about it. The best items are not going to be anywhere near as valuable when the first expansion comes out, because I mean, again, for all we know, the expansion might not have that much more. It might not up the level that much. It might still be level 60 and just have a new act with few new good items. I doubt that. It's probably going to be what we've seen with Lord of Destruction. So it's natural. It's going to happen. There's really no way of stopping it, and it's actually necessary to keep the game's economy running.
yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's a much kinder type of ladder reset. It doesn't remove the items from the economy. You get to keep everything that you had beforehand, but it makes it all virtually useless. And it causes you to have to go through and kind of restart from scratch.
Mm.
Especially if with like the in terms of the real money auction house, you won't. I guess I don't really know how much money people will be able to make from it, but you won't really start off at some sort of super advanced level going into the expansion from before. You'll have just as much money as you did previously. You'd be on the same equal footing. Someone that comes in like the second expansion that never played for the previous first few years is more or less going to be equal footing because he can come in and have like $100 to go through and spend in the auction house or something along those lines. So just get himself brought up to that level immediately once he reaches the level cap.
Real money will always be the dominant currency. So $100 in expansion one will be obviously far more valuable than $100 bought you in expansion in the vanilla game. So gold will always, sorry, real money will always be, I guess, the most valuable commodity in the game, and there's no way of avoiding that.
So speaking of, that was kind of the next topic. Is everyone's kind of assuming, well, many people are assuming that the highest level items will only be sold for real money, and that the gold trading will kind of be the lower level and mid level stuff. Do you think that's likely, or do you have a counterpoint?
It's kind of the whole point is people are looking at it on the wrong perspective. Gold and real money, in essence, are the same thing. They're just based on exchange rate. So, you know, when the game comes out, you're going to see two key measurements, and one of them is going to be gold. How much money? Sorry, how much gold $1 buys you? So $1 real money buys you X amount of gold. It's going to work exactly like Forex will work. So it's going to be two currencies that are interchangeable. So realistically, it's irrelevant whether you use real money or gold to purchase something, but then it comes down to listing fees. So for example, say we've got a gem that costs, it's worth less than 5 cents. So maybe 5 cents is worth 100 gold, right? You wouldn't really go and buy it for 5 cents because the auction fees are probably the auction fees will probably be more than 5 cents. So that's the type of item that you'll always use gold to purchase, only because it's more efficient. But at the end of the day, you accumulate a billion gold, right? That's going to convert to a real life currency. So they're one in the same. you'll just use whatever's more appropriate at the time. If an item costs $10, you would rather, you could get 10 billion gold for it, or you could just sell it for $10, and then use that money to buy gold later on. So they're
Yeah, and then you
completely
just
liquid
use the
currencies.
$10. You just use the $10 to buy the 10 billion gold in the auction house because that's what people have it for sale for.
Exactly. So the relationship between item prices will be very much based on the exchange rate. So if something costs $10 and $1 equals a billion gold, then that's 10 billion gold. Full stop. They're interchangeable currencies.
Counterpoint, psychological drawbacks of that. Many people who may all be lying and may give in when the temptation arises, etc., have said they're not going to practice real money trading. They feel it's ethically inappropriate. It shouldn't be part of the game. You compare it to Forex, which is a foreign exchange kind of currency trading thing. Nobody in Forex says, I'm not going to use anything that trades for yen because I'm ideologically opposed to Japanese currency. You just do whatever you're doing. And many people have claimed that they will not take part in real money trading, which seems like it might actually skew the economies in some way. Do you think that they will, or that's a very small percentage, and it won't matter anyway because other people will just take advantage of that if they do?
Look, again, it comes back to the whole currency. Sorry, gold equals real money. So by not using real money and using gold only, in essence, you still are using real money because your gold is worth real money. So it's a
Sounds
bit
like
of
Bobby Kotick talking.
it's a bit of a sort of a negligible point because it's the same thing in essence. Currency is currency.
Yeah, and also they're going to be putting themselves at a huge disadvantage because if they completely ignore the real money auction house and they just go to sell their items and someone that actually is taking advantage of it and is looking at both sides of the coin, more or less, both the gold and the real money auction house. This other person gets an item. There's none of it listed in the gold auction house. They're completely, have sworn off the real money auction house, and they just put it up for some random figure that someone's going and checking both and sees, oh, they've put it up for 1 billion gold. That item is selling for $100. That's 100 billion gold. I'm going to buy that and then throw it over in the real money auction house. If they purposely are making themselves ignorant, they're going to get the short end of the stick.
Hardcore. No real money auction house supported by Blizzard for hardcore players.
Can I put on my tinfoil hat?
You took it off?
This is Blizzard going through and continuing the support for the third-party, gold farming websites because you still have to.
You mean they're secret investors?
Yes, they're secret investors that paying off Blizzard the entire time. This is their little snip in so that they can still make money, through this auction house system. Okay, I'll take my tinfoil hat off now. My real thoughts on this one is just the fact of, say you go through, you get a hardcore character and you put like $2,000 on them. The Battle.net connection stops. Your character dies, and you just lost $2,000 on this character. You're going to be calling up your attorney and saying, look, this isn't any fault of my own. Blizzard just robbed me of $2,000 because they want me to go through and buy more stuff from the auction house and to rack up more of those transaction charges against me. And then there's going to be a big legal battle going through and having to pull IP logs and things like that. Well, where did the lag originate? Did it originate on the Blizzard server and all other types of stuff to try and put blame and say that Blizzard is responsible for me losing my $2,000 hardcore character because of lag? That is why I see them not using the real money auction house. For the hardcore characters is to disavow themselves of any potential legal ramifications of someone losing real money that they've invested into a character.
Yeah. I think that's correct. I think to add to that, I think it's more also that anything that requires a permanent sort of loss of everything you own and everything you invested sort of brings up the stakes a bit for them. So obviously, if you buy an item and the item devalues after a patch, it's you're going to be upset, but you're not going to cry about it. You're not going to lose much sleep over it. But if you lose an entire, I guess 6 months of hard work, 6 months of investing, and all that stuff in because of a lag spike, it's just asking for trouble. It's on their end asking for trouble that people are obviously going to be very, very, very upset, and they're going to I guess escalate it a lot more than someone who just lost a bit of money because a patch made their item a bit crappier. So I think it's more of a protective mechanism for themselves, so they don't have to. They just don't want to touch that subject, because it's a very sensitive subject, and it could potentially be something that will really, really annoy players and cause a lot of trouble. So it's really their way of just limiting their, I guess, liability, and they just don't want to touch it, basically.
And that's funny because fans often cite, the TOS or the EULA as though they are these ironclad, unbreakable things, and anything a company says in them. And yeah, obviously they can, they can't say we get your soul and your firstborn. Even if you click agree to that, that doesn't mean they can take it.
Yeah, that's right.
Terms of service and the end user license agreements are only as strong as your lawyer, more or less, and how good he can try and interpret that into actual law and sway the judge's or jury's opinion into why your terms of service is correct.
The thing about the RMT and hardcore that I'm curious about is more, less in terms of legal ramifications and more in terms of how players are going to handle this system. I asked you this earlier about regular auction house softcore items. And was saying, well, if this item sells for $50, that's the same as selling for 500 million gold or whatever the exchange rate is. But there is no exchange rate in hardcore.
It'll be dictated by supply and demand, just like the regular auction houses will be. So if there's more, obviously it's proportional to the population of the hardcore players, but the price will be self-determined. It will be very different to the softcore auction house. So don't be surprised to see that the prices are totally different. So I don't think it'll draw inspiration from any other auction houses. But with the point of there is no real currency, there's only gold. That will solely depend on how Blizzard deal with the gold sinks versus the supply of gold. If they, like I said, if it turns out to be that they continue this sort of gold is pretty low in value because it can do all this stuff, 5,000 gold in 1 hour of play, then it's going to heavily cheapen the value of gold, and people are going to start trading in scraps and gems and other, I guess, more movable objects, such as, more liquid objects rather than currency. Because if gold reaches the point where it's not that desirable because there's so much of it, people aren't going to use it as currency. Hopefully that doesn't happen, because that would basically be like Diablo 2 all over again with Stones of Jordan. But I think they need to be very careful with the way they treat gold in the end game. It needs to be very meaningful.
Having the auction house is the central form of trading that the vast majority of all the trading is going to be going through. Since it is going to be gold, that will always at least still give gold value, because you'll always need it in which to trade for the items that you're looking for.
Yeah, it wins by default.
Character sales. As we know, they are going to allow characters to be sold via the auction house for gold or for real money. At least they're planning on that. How do you envision character pricing working?
I have a feeling they're probably going to back off on the character selling. I could be wrong, but I think it's not necessary, especially with now that you don't need more than one of each class. You don't have to, you don't spec permanently or anything like that. You can change, you can change your skills in combat even. So I somehow think the market there won't be as I guess important first expected to be,
unless there is some sort of permanency. They've talked about the rune system possibly changing, and this was something Nineball was happy about, I think, in a previous podcast, where runes might be attuned and stuck to a certain skill, and once you socket it, it can only be used in that skill. So then you could sell, I'm selling a level 60 wizard with items, X, Y, and Z, but he's also got, level 7 plus 5% resist all rune stuck in this skill, which cannot be used in any other skill. We missed one area of tinfoil hat stuff in terms of the no item bindings, which seems to encourage additional item trading. And of course, Blizzard's making their money off the auction house via taking, a small fee for each transaction.
They're churning our accounts.
So did Blizzard not have item binding in Diablo 3 in order to create more transactions in order to make more profit?
It could certainly be interpreted that way.
I think I just did, actually.
I don't think so. Only because realistically, it's not going to add that much. I mean, we're talking,
But as you said, this is the 1% of items that actually matter.
It is.
That's what people are really going to trade for. No one's going to sell a lot of, you're not going to spend 5 cents on a gem. You're going
Yeah.
to spend $20 on the wind force.
But you got to
Well,
remember that they've changed it from a percent based, so it's going to be a flat fee. So it really doesn't matter how good the item is. So if the item sells for, if it's an excellent item that sells for $200, Blizzard will still get their X amount of
Their
dollars
quarter or
regardless.
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't believe that only the highest level items are going to be what's, sold. In the beginning, yes, it's going to be true, but like a year into it, people that are going to be using the real money auction house, they're going to have a wallet full of, the Bobby bucks that they're going to be able to spend. They might spend $2 on a level 20 or level 30 item for the character that they're going and twinking out or doing low level PvP duels or something of that nature, just because they now have, a wallet full of this currency. They'll be
And nothing,
inclined to
nothing else to spend it on.
yeah, exactly. It's going to just more or less breed the interest itself, just as you increase your funds in your little wallet there from doing trading in the real money auction house. You're going to go through and you're going to see, oh, well, that's a really nice rare level 30 item that I can go and put on my monk. And it's only $3. I've got $150 in my account. Yeah, sure, I'll go and spend it on that. That's no problem. That's just like saying I have 10,000 gold and I see something for 500. I'll just go and spend 500 gold on this. It's a couple percentage of my overall wealth, but it's not really that big of a problem. Just throw it on my level 30. What do you think that the real potential is of us, being able to make money? Is it something is my goal going to be to make the $60 that I spent on the game back? Is it going to be something that I can use to pay for my BlizzCon trip next year? Or is it something that I can replace or supplement my income with?
I think so that's a question that a lot of people are asking, and I think people are probably again looking at it in the wrong way. I think for the average player, so for the person who's playing to have fun and they're just going to use the currency for convenience and all that sort of stuff. They're not really intent on making money. I don't think people will that sort of person will make money. So farmers are not going to make money. Chinese farmers will, but the average farmer player who's doing their meth runs or whatever, they're not going to be the people who make a meaningful income. It's going to be people who really buy and sell large quantities of items, and people who really sort of analyze the auction house. And one of the major, I guess, areas of potential is the difference between the gold auction house and the real money auction house. So you could go into the gold auction house and buy an item there for X amount of gold, and depending on what the exchange rate is, you can potentially resell that same item on the real money auction house and make a profit. So that's the kind of things that they're the kind of people who will make a lot of money, people who really, really play the auction house. So it's going to be less about farming and more about buying large quantities and selling large quantities of items and making a profit out of that.
And making a nickel on a million profit sales instead of trying to find your one jackpot wind force.
Exactly, and that's something I think a lot of people are expecting. Oh, I'm gonna go in there and farm all day, and I'm gonna make a good amount of money. It's probably not going to work like that. Yeah, there's too much competition in that, because I think a lot of people are planning on the very action of playing the game is farming. So that kind of rules out any kind of focused farming, unless you multi-box or something like that. And I mean, people who do multi-box might be able to make a small amount of money, but the real big the money's going to be in predicting trends and playing the auction house, looking at the exchange rates, studying the relationship between the gold auction house and the real money auction house. Because it's such a new system and not many people have dealt with a virtual currency and virtual auction house, there's going to be a lot of potential to manipulate that. So it's not going to regulate immediately. It will regulate over time, but you're going to see pretty big inconsistencies between the pricing on the gold auction house versus pricing on the real money auction house. So, for example, you might get a gem that costs $1 on the real money auction house, but it might cost 500 gold on that auction house, but the exchange rate might be 600 gold per dollar. So therefore, there's 100 gold there to be made by doing that trade. So there's things like that where it's not going to be completely in balance right away. And then you're going to get fluctuations in, maybe the price of gold drops, but everything on the gold auction house is still the same price. So you can go in there and buy them there and resell them on the real money auction house and make small quantities of gold.
So just like the real world, people who actually make things don't really make any money from it. It's the people who shuffle around the quantities and
Exactly.
manipulate the figures and do it with sneaky banking stuff behind your back.
Exactly. It's a highly competitive area. So, like in the real world, stockbrokers are all pretty, competitive, and they don't actually, they're not in the companies working and creating, products and things like that. they're the ones actually, buying and selling other people's property, and making money from there, producing value where really they're not producing any material object, and that's going to be the same thing here. There's very small differences between this auction house and a real sort of stock market. It's going to be very, very similar.
And that's what your site is going to be, enabling. You're going to have charts and figures and graphs and editorials and such.
Exactly. So to begin with, obviously because the game's not out, there is no auction house. So we're probably going to begin with a lot of, I guess, theory and a lot of guides and articles and things like that. When we do come closer to release, we're going to definitely have things like the exchange rate. We're going to be monitoring prices for commodities such as gems, scraps, and we're going to put a lot of statistics in there and analysis. So you can, load up the site and look at what, how much the price of gold has changed in the last week, how much it's changed in the last 6 months, etc. There's going to be some, cross relationship statistics where you'll be able to see, has commodities might have gone up, but, gems have gone up more, rubies may have gone up more than sapphires. Now, why is that? Is there a recipe that uses more rubies? Things like that. So there's going to be a lot of analysis that will, and the whole purpose of it is to give people the knowledge in how it's going to work, because it's such a new system. A lot of people don't know how it works. They don't necessarily know that it's, there are going to be certain relationships that are very important to monitor, such as, the exchange rate between gold and real money. And it's just to shed light on all that whole subject, basically doing the work for everybody and doing all the calculations, so you can just look at the site and get an accurate perspective on what the market's doing and what things are worth.
And you have real life experience in this field?
I do. I'm an economics graduate. I don't actually work in economics, funnily enough. I'm in IT. I do have an economics degree though. And obviously avid gamer, played a lot of Blizzard titles primarily, and when I spotted even before the real money auction house was announced, I always knew there would be a big market in Diablo 3 because of the way the item system works. It's far more robust than World of Warcraft, and items like you can sell equipable items, which is a huge deal. So there's always the whole Diablo 3 is going to be a very, very interesting economy, and now that there's the real money auction house, it's just even more interesting now. And that's basically why we chose to do this.
And Blizzard has said they're going to add the auction house into the beta at some point, not the real money aspect, but just the basic function. I assume you'll be leaping on that, with proverbial both feet, the second it's available, like just seeing how everything works and trying out your scripts and such.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to need to see, how we can, what kind of information we can get and what kind of analysis we can publish, and that's obviously going to depend on what's available.
Yeah, they've said that they're going to have some sort of web-based client that you can go through and view the auction house, like what they have in World of Warcraft now. So I imagine, they're going to open that up to and put an API out for it as well, just like they're doing for so they'll basically make all that information free for people to go through and rummage through with bots and scripts and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that'll definitely, in the event that they do that, and they probably will, it's just a matter of time. We'll be able to produce some pretty robust measurements. I mean, we'll be able to basically give everybody, the market price of unique items. Windforce costs, this amount of money, and it's costed this amount of money for, a graph of the price changes and things like that.
You've been listening to the Diablo Podcast, and we are online at diablopodcast.com. Moo.
Moo.
Money.
You've got to do it, man. You have to.
Moo.